with mobile phones, moving transactions between each other. And I stopped at that point and I went, holy shit, this is Bitcoin, what we were talking about back then. I thought this was never going to go anywhere, and I probably still have the same feeling. And at that point, my two sons came in and they wanted to switch over and watch football. And I went, yeah, I've got no interest in watching this. So we switched over and watched football. So Bitcoin was, as a brand, as a name, was very familiar to me.
When was anything else to say about the first meeting for some years?
Nothing apart from the fact, we left. It was, as I say, a short meeting. We had a couple of hamburgers between us and a Coke. There was no alcohol involved. I went upstairs. My wife said to me, my partner said to me, how did that meeting go? And I said, it was a nice meeting, but didn't seem to be any real reason to meet apart from catching up with someone that I knew.
What happened next?
Next, I got contacted again by Craig. I'm going to say somewhere around about April 2015 to say that he had some matters that he wanted to discuss with me, and he wanted to do that in some detail, and he would like to get my advice. I said to him, well, I have some personal issues that I need to deal with face to face. My lawyers need me in person in Australia in a couple of weeks' time. So let's park this and I can meet you when I'm in Australia and we can talk.
Yes. Did you go back to Australia? Did you talk?
I did. I went back to Australia. I stayed at the Airport Holiday Inn. I went into the city in the morning, met my lawyers, did what I needed to do, went back to the Holiday Inn, and I met Craig and two other guys, Alan Pedersen and Dr. Savannah.
Who are they?
They were introduced to me as two people who were working for the De Morgan Group. So we sat in the lobby area and had a light lunch. Craig didn't say terribly much at lunch. The other two spoke to me at length about what had been going on within the De Morgan Group, the research that had been undertaken, and we had some interesting debates about the application of blockchain technology and Bitcoin to some of the project areas that they were working on.
Yes.
Then I became aware that the De Morgan Group had some issues with research and development activity and grants that have been applied for. And I asked Craig to stop the meeting then, it was mid-afternoon by this point, and ask him if he could join me for dinner that night.
Okay.
Then I went to my room and I started doing research.
What kind of research?
Online. And I started, for the first time, reading the history of what had occurred since 2009. Lots about Satoshi Nakamoto. And I was staring at a PDF of the white paper on my screen. And it was one of those moments where you sit there and you go, I'm looking at something that's almost ghost-like. I've seen this before, I've read this before, now I'm seeing a part of the story that I didn't know. And when I met Craig for dinner, we sat down in the lobby restaurant, and first question I asked him was, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? And he looked at me and he said, you already know the answer to that question.
So he deferred?
No, that was typical Craig with the way he replies to things. So I said to him, look, I'm not in the mood to play riddles. We're here to talk about some serious stuff tonight, so give me a straight answer. And he looked straight at me and said, I am. And I said
this was we're in April 2015.
I'm going to say we were in late April or early May 2015.
So he actually confirmed to you during that dinner that he was the person behind the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto?
Yes, he did. And he also confirmed something else to me, because in the conversations that we had over about 4 or 5 hours, I asked him about, we were discussing the white paper, and I made a statement to him where I said, I've read that white paper before in 2008, and he said, no, you haven't. And I said, Craig, I know what I read. I did, and he said, no, you read 2 iterations prior to release. So Craig that says something that you asked me about earlier, about Craig's personality and style. He's very, very, very specific.
Okay, so your question then was imprecise, in his opinion?
In his opinion, yes. In my opinion, no.
Any more discussions about De Morgan and that company group's
Yes.
difficulties?
Yeah, we talked about the structure of the group, the number of companies that existed within the group, what the purpose and intent was of having a group structured that way. We talked about the fact that De Morgan had independent directors, which surprised me. We talked about the process of undertaking research where you're intending for that research to qualify under the Commonwealth Government R&D grant scheme, and the process of filing applications for research topics to be approved by Aus Industry, and the Aus Industry approvals that come back that give you obviously the case file numbers that you can then use to relate those to the claim for rebates against the expenditure on those projects that are administered through the Australian Taxation Office. We talked about the fact that the Australian government changed the grant scheme where it did originally have a cap of $2 million, and that the prior year that cap had been lifted, so it was open-ended. We talked about the fact that one of the companies had already filed an application under the scheme and had been assessed and been given a rebate in the current tax year. And then we talked about the fact that there were a number of other applications in process where the government had decided that because of the size of the claims, they wanted to conduct audits, and that's where the problems started to arise.
Okay, so did you then discuss solutions to these problems?
Not right there and then. I asked Craig why he was coming to me with this discussion, and he said it was because of all the people that he could go to. He felt that I was most likely the one that would understand and be able to give him guidance or advice about what I would do that he could relate to. He also discussed with me at that dinner the fact that he had had meetings and fairly advanced discussions with Macquarie Bank in Australia, and he was either had a term sheet or had been discussing a term sheet with them for an advance of 10 million Australian dollars, which would allow him to engage professional support and services to be able to resolve the audit issues with the tax office around the R&D activities. But he was not inclined to go down that path. He didn't trust that process. He felt that there was almost an inevitable nature that he would lose control of his involvement in his IP. And I asked him the question that was the most telling one for me in that dinner was towards the end, when I said to him, what is it that you really want? Because I need to understand the the answer to that so that I can get my head around how to advise you. And he said, what I really want is not to run a business. I don't want to be responsible for people. I don't want to be responsible for legal, finance, accounting, admin, all the other processes that run in a business. I want to sit independently of that. I want to do research. I want to complete the research that's in my head, which has been in my head, and this surprised me, for 15 to 20 years. I've got things in my head that are all interrelated, that come together, and it's going to take me a lifetime to complete this. And I can't do that successfully if I'm responsible for running a business. And secondly, I'm not good at running businesses.
Okay, so let's then turn on to the solutions. What happened next?
I flew back to Manila the next morning. Actually, we were the last people to leave the restaurant, just a closing note. I went back to Manila the next morning. I sat at home and I thought to myself, how am I going to approach this? I need, just like Craig reached out to me and said, I need somebody to talk to. I felt the same need. I thought I need to talk to somebody who will be able to relate to the situation that I'm going to explain to them. And I called a friend of mine, Calvin Eyre, who was in Vancouver at the time. And I said to him, Calvin, I've got something I want to discuss with you, but it's quite a story and you're going to need to be seated. And he went, oh hell, this is going to be good. And I said, no, it's not that type of situation.
Take this a bit shorter so
Yes.
that we don't run out of time. You approach Calvin Eyre, told
Yes.
him about the conversation you had with Craig Wright some days before.
Yes.
How did Mr. Eyre react to that?
He asked for 24 hours to think about it, and then we talked again. And then in the second conversation, we agreed that he asked me what I thought we should do, and I said I think we should sit down with Craig and have a more detailed conversation face to face, which we did the following week.
Where?
Vancouver. Craig and I both flew from Manila and Sydney to Vancouver, and I introduced him to Calvin on the Monday.
Okay, so the meetings in Vancouver, did they produce any immediate results?
No, but the meetings in Vancouver, Mr. Eyre and I both concluded that the most relevant person that we could introduce Craig to be involved in this discussion was Robert McGregor. He had formed a company in Vancouver some years earlier called Entrust, and it was providing advanced remittance services, electronic remittance services in the corridor between Canada and the Philippines. And we both knew that McGregor and that company had been doing things with Bitcoin or blockchain type technologies. So that was the conclusion that came out of the meetings.
And just to have that clear, because it's easy to go wrong here. Encrypt, that's the name of Mr. McGregor's business entity?
It was the pre-existing name of a company that McGregor owned or controlled that was based in Vancouver.
Yeah. Is there any connection between Encrypt and N-Chain, which you are now the chairman of the board of?
Well, the connection, of course, is that the N-Chain group was formed, and then at a point after that, N-Chain acquired, well, it was Encrypt acquired Entrust from McGregor,
Okay.
And then the group changed its name to N-Chain.
Okay, we'll come to that later.
Yeah.
But at this point, there is no direct link between Mr. McGregor's business entities and Mr. Eyre's business entities, or business entities related to those two persons.
None whatsoever.
No.